Did you know that history's greatest victories were born out of defeat? Rome knew this, and that's why it ruled the world. But what made the Roman Empire so powerful wasn't just its soldiers or its swords. It was strategy, keeping a cool head, and above all, the ability to learn from its failures. While other empires crumbled after a loss, Rome only grew, stronger and more relentless. But here's what nobody tells you. Rome didn't win every battle, not even close. It suffered a humiliating defeat at Cannae, was betrayed in Teutoburg, Forest, and nearly collapsed at Actium. Yet from those ashes emerged the lessons that shaped its empire, and that can shape you today. Because believe me, the strategies that won wars can also conquer personal and professional challenges. What you learn from these battles might just be the missing piece to turn your life around. Now here's a direct question. Are you ready to discover how Rome defeated its enemies and how you can use those same tactics to win the battles in your own life? The secret is closer than you think, and by the end, you'll see that these aren't just stories. They're time-tested strategies. So get ready, because when you learn about the battles that shaped Rome, you'll start seeing the world and your challenges with fresh eyes. And the best part? The knowledge that built an empire is now within your reach. Ready to dive in? Rome's rise to global power wasn't a stroke of luck. The secret to its military supremacy lay in the finely tuned machinery of its war machine. Roman soldiers weren't just ordinary warriors. They were part of a meticulously organized structure where discipline and strategy were the cornerstones. From the days of the Roman Republic, the empire forged a military force feared for its professionalism and innovation. Each legion was a piece on a deadly chessboard, moved with precision to subdue enemies and expand Rome's territories. So, what made this machine so efficient? First, there was the legionary structure. A Roman legion was made up of about 5,000 soldiers, divided into smaller units like centuries and cohorts, which allowed for exceptional mobility and coordination on the battlefield. Then there was the rigorous training. Legionaries marched miles every day, lugging heavy equipment and mastering formations like the famed testudo, which transformed them into a moving fortress. And discipline was non-negotiable. A Roman soldier would never run away. Desertion was punished by death. If there was one thing that set the Roman army apart from the rest, it was its ability to adapt. Contact with other peoples allowed them to absorb new tactics, weapons, and even military structures. Take their large, rectangular shields, for example. They evolved from conflicts with the Samnites. The use of advanced siege weapons like ballistae and catapults was refined through wars against the Greeks and Carthaginians. Rome didn't just fight. It learned and fine-tuned its strategies, always staying one step ahead of its foes. For the Romans, war wasn't just a necessity. It was a growth mechanism. Conquered territories meant resources, slaves, riches, and more soldiers to recruit. But what made this expansion sustainable was the way Rome integrated the conquered peoples. Instead of simply crushing its enemies, it often offered citizenship, forged alliances, and even granted positions of power. This created a network of loyalty within the empire, making its military might even more unshakable, and of course, even the mightiest empires suffered defeats. And Rome had its fair share of catastrophic ones. None were as devastating as the Battle of Cannae. It was there that the Roman Republic faced its worst nightmare, an enemy who knew its weaknesses and exploited them masterfully. Hannibal Barca, one of the greatest military geniuses in history, proved that even the seemingly invincible Roman army could be crushed. But how did it happen? Let's dive into that legendary battle. If there's one battle that made Rome tremble to its core, it was Cannae. Under a scorching sun, thousands of Roman soldiers marched with the confidence of those who believed they were invincible. But on the other side stood Hannibal, the Carthaginian strategist who turned the battlefield into a veritable slaughterhouse. With a smaller, multicultural force made up of Gauls, Iberians, and Numidians, he taught Rome a bitter lesson. Sometimes brute strength can't outmatch sheer intelligence. Hannibal's tactic at Cannae is still studied today as the ultimate example of a double envelopment. He placed his most vulnerable troops in the center to lure the Romans in, while positioning his hardier, more experienced forces on the flanks. The Romans, confident in their numerical superiority, advanced en masse. It was exactly what Hannibal wanted. When the Roman front plunged into the Carthaginian center, Hannibal's wings closed in like a trap, forming a deadly encirclement. The Roman world had never faced anything so devastating. For the Roman soldiers, hell took shape on that field. Trapped in a maelstrom of chaos with no room to maneuver, many were crushed to death before even feeling a sword's edge. It was like being swept away in a torrent with no escape. Reports say the ground was so littered with bodies that you could barely see the earth. Rome lost nearly 70,000 soldiers in a single day. Among them were consuls, senators, and the crème de la crème of Roman aristocracy. It was a defeat that reverberated not just on the battlefield, but in the heart of the Senate itself. But here's the key takeaway. Even in the face of disaster, Rome refused to give in to despair. And there's a lesson in that. When your life crumbles like it did at Cannae, you have two choices: surrender or fight on. The Senate refused to negotiate with Hannibal. Instead, it doubled down, recruiting even slaves to form new armies. That resilience is the true Roman spirit. Defeat is just a chapter, not the end of the story. And what about you? In moments of crisis, do you follow Rome's example and rise up? Or do you let defeat be your final word? That battle changed Rome forever. But they still hadn't seen what Caesar would do at Alesia. Alesia wasn't just a battle. It was a spectacle of strategy and endurance, where the brilliance of Roman military engineering outshone any hope of a Gaulish victory. Julius Caesar, with his razor-sharp mind and thirst for conquest, faced Vercingetorix, the leader of the Gaulish tribes, in a showdown that would determine the fate of Gaul. Under Caesar's guidance, the Roman Empire turned the siege into a deadly trap, proving that sometimes winning a war isn't about raw power, but about patience and ingenuity. Caesar knew that the key to victory was isolating Alesia. With a tireless legion, he built a double line of fortifications, one encircling the city from the inside and another facing outward to protect his soldiers from enemy reinforcements. That amounted to 16 kilometers of walls, ditches, and traps, a true nightmare for any opposing force. The Roman soldiers worked around the clock, proving that Rome's power wasn't just in its swords, but also in its ability to plan and execute with surgical precision. Desperate, Vercingetorix tried to hold out inside the city while sending messengers for reinforcements. But when those reinforcements arrived, they encountered Caesar's true genius, the siege within a siege. The Roman army, protected by its double fortifications, faced off against the external Gauls while keeping the besieged starving inside. It was a clear demonstration that in both battle and life, controlling territory and timing is worth more than sheer numbers. This strategy teaches us something powerful. Victory often belongs to those who know how to wait and smother the enemy. With smart tactics, not just brute force. Think about it. Are you relying solely on raw effort, or are you building your own fortifications, planning, strategizing, and preparing to withstand the siege of life's challenges? Sometimes a strategic pause beats a direct assault. In the end, Vercingetorix surrendered, marking Caesar's triumph and cementing Gaul under Roman rule. But while the world celebrated this feat, far away another battlefield was brewing. A new threat was emerging to challenge Rome, and its name was Hannibal. Zama set the stage for a showdown between two giants of military strategy, Scipio Africanus and Hannibal Barca. Still reeling from the loss at Cannae, the Roman Empire was determined to turn the tide. Scipio, a protégé of Hannibal's own strategic brilliance, proved that learning from your enemy is the most powerful weapon of all. He not only studied Carthaginian tactics, but refined them, turning the battlefield into an unforgettable lesson for Rome and for military history. The major challenge at Zama was Hannibal's war elephants, massive living fortresses that spread chaos wherever they went. But Scipio, rather than retreating, relied on his wits. He created corridors between his legions so the elephants could pass straight through, thereby disorganizing the Carthaginian front line. This maneuver is a perfect example of how sometimes the best counterattack is to turn your enemy's force against them. Think about it. In your life, how can you turn a direct attack into an opportunity to undermine those who oppose you? But Zama wasn't won by strategy alone. It was won through adaptation. Scipio blended the discipline of the Roman legions with tactics he'd picked up during the Hispania campaign, creating a versatile fighting force. He deployed the Numidian cavalry on the flanks, trusting them to pursue and dismantle Hannibal's supporting troops. It's a clear lesson. Great victories come when you combine your own skills with lessons learned from past experiences. When the clash of swords finally subsided and the dust settled, Hannibal was defeated and Carthage fell. Rome not only won the war, but also solidified its dominance in the Mediterranean, emerging as an indisputable global force. And Scipio's true merit lay in defeating Hannibal with the enemy's own weapons, proving that those who learn from the master eventually surpass the master. So, what about you? Are you ready to turn the tables by learning from those who have already fought the battles you face today? Because Rome's story was far from over. In the next battle, the seas would set the stage, and the Roman Republic would face a confrontation that would change its destiny forever. Actium. Actium wasn't just a naval battle. It marked the end of an era and the start of a new one. In the turbulent waters of the Ionian Sea, Rome wasn't facing a foreign enemy, but itself. On one side stood Octavian, the symbol of the future Roman Empire. On the other, Mark Antony and Cleopatra, defenders of a fading past. This wasn't merely a power struggle, it was a fight for legacy. And as always, the battle was won through strategy, not brute force. Octavian, with his fleet commanded by Agrippa, did what every great strategist must do: dominate the terrain, or in this case, the sea. By using smaller, more agile ships, he cut off Antony's supply routes, forcing him to fight on weakened terms. It's a perfect example of how in war and in life, victory often comes from isolating your opponent and forcing them to play by your rules. In your own projects, are you setting the pace? Or are you stuck playing by someone else's rules? When the battle erupted, chaos reigned. Ships collided and soldiers clashed in brutal hand-to-hand combat on decks soaked with blood. But the turning point came with an unexpected twist. Cleopatra pulled back with part of the Egyptian fleet, and Mark Antony, in a desperate move, chased after her, leaving his men behind. It was proof that in any battle, alliances can be just as important as weapons. Ask yourself, are you surrounded by people who'll stand by you until the very end? Octavian's triumph at Actium wasn't achieved solely through naval might. It was won through psychological warfare. He had already won before the battle ended by undermining his enemy's morale and forcing them into mistakes. It's a clear lesson. Whether you're negotiating, managing a project, or facing a personal challenge, victory belongs to those who control their emotions, not merely those wielding the sharpest sword. With the victory at Actium, the Roman Republic came to an end, and the Roman Empire was born under the name Augustus. But Roman expansion wouldn't bring only glory. Soon, Rome would face a nightmare that would mark its history, a massacre in a distant forest where Roman discipline would be pushed to its limits. Are you ready to learn about the horror of the Teutoburg forest? The Teutoburg forest wasn't just a defeat for Rome. It was a trauma. Imagine thousands of Roman soldiers used to vast roads and open formations, trapped in a suffocating ambush among dark, towering trees, in muddy terrain, and under a hail of unseen arrows. The Roman Empire, which had conquered deserts, mountains, and seas, was undone by something as simple as treacherous terrain and betrayal. Commander Publius Varus marched with 3 legions, trusting Arminius, a supposed Germanic ally who was secretly plotting his downfall. Arminius knew Rome's military methods inside and out. After all, he had been trained by them. He used that knowledge to dismantle the Roman strategy, luring Varus into a narrow path where formations and discipline, their greatest weapons, became useless. It's a bitter reminder. Knowing your enemy is important, but knowing yourself is vital. In your life, are you aware of the Arminius disguised as allies? When the ambush struck, terror set in. The Roman soldiers, unable to form their usual formations, fell into panic. It rained, the mud sucked at their feet, and their heavy armor turned into a death sentence. Many didn't even die fighting. They simply succumbed to exhaustion and despair. It's a perfect illustration that in battle or business, the environment can be your worst enemy. Are you choosing the right terrain to fight your battles, or are you venturing into forests where your strategy just won't work? Faced with collapse, Varus took his own life, a gesture that symbolized not only a military defeat, but the shattering of the Roman spirit. This battle was so impactful that when Emperor Augustus received the news, he roamed the palace shouting, "Varus, return my legions!" A scene that shows how a strategic blunder can shake even the mightiest of leaders. But here's the most valuable lesson. Despite the humiliation in Teutoburg, Rome did not retreat. It learned. It reformed its tactics, fortified its borders with the Germanic limes, and above all, never underestimated an enemy again. This battle didn't mark the end of Roman expansion, it marked its evolution. And just like Rome, are you willing to learn from your defeats, or will you let them define you? Now we've reached the point where the scars of these battles have forever shaped Rome. But what legacy did these victories and defeats leave for the world and for you? Rome's battles were not merely bloody confrontations, they were immortal lessons. Every victory and every defeat helped forge what we know as the art of war, inspiring armies, generals, and empires for centuries. The Roman Empire didn't conquer the world just with swords and shields, but with strategy, discipline, and a unique ability to learn from its mistakes. The echoes of these battles still resonate today, and if you listen closely, you'll find valuable lessons for your own life. The evolution of the Roman military system is perhaps the greatest legacy of these wars. From Cannae, Rome learned the importance of flexibility and tactical innovation. From Alesia, the value of defensive strategy and patience. From Zama, the importance of adapting to enemy tactics. From Actium, the power of emotional control and choosing your battleground. And from Teutoburg, the devastating impact of negligence and betrayal. This is how true strength is built, by falling, getting back up, and improving. Are you doing the same in your daily battles? Beyond the battlefield, these conflicts also reshaped the very concept of power and empire. Rome built roads, fortresses, and permanent legions that became models for armies well into modern times. The very idea of total war, where economy, diplomacy, and psychology are woven into combat, was born with the Roman Empire. The question is, are you limiting your strategies to just what you see, or are you wielding all your weapons, mental, emotional, and relational, to overcome your challenges? And there's also an invisible but powerful legacy, the spirit of resilience. Rome never let a defeat define its destiny. Instead, it used every failure as fuel for its next triumph. That's the biggest lesson. Victory doesn't belong to the strongest, but to the one who learns the most. And honestly, isn't that what you want too, turning your defeats into stepping stones for success? So here's the big question. Are you just watching Rome's history unfold, or are you applying its lessons in your own life? Because Rome fell, but its legacy endures. And just like Rome, your true victory won't be measured by what you conquer, but by what you build to last. Now the next battle is yours. So tell me, which of these battles struck you the most? Was it Caesar's strategic brilliance at Alesia, or Rome's resilience after the Teutoburg disaster? More importantly, are you merely admiring these stories, or are you putting them into practice in your own life? Because in the end, the difference between winning and losing comes down to what you do with what you learn. Now it's up to you. Are you ready to turn every defeat into a future victory? Have you ever stopped to think, who are your true allies? Which Arminius is lurking around you? And more, are you leading your life like Scipio at Zama with strategy and adaptability? Or are you just reacting like Varus in Teutoburg, lost in the chaos of battle? Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither are you. But with every new strategy you learn, you're building your own personal empire. And if you've made it this far, it's clear you're after the kind of knowledge that transforms. So, I ask you, are you going to stop now, or will you keep learning and growing stronger, battle after battle? If you enjoyed these lessons and want to keep exploring the strategies that shaped empires and can shape your life, subscribe to the channel now and hit the notifications. That way, you won't miss a single video in this epic series. And together, we'll learn to fight like Rome, with wisdom, strategy, and victory. Now get ready, because the battles might be over, but the war for knowledge is just beginning. Ready for the next one?